Britain is hurtling towards disaster as record-breaking migrant crossings flood the English Channel, setting the nation on track for its worst immigration crisis in history. The blame? It lands squarely at the feet of Keir Starmer's Labour government, which, despite repeated warnings, recklessly scrapped the Rwanda deportation plan, a policy designed to deter illegal crossings. With 1,489 migrants having already crossed the Channel in just over a month, this year has already shattered previous records. Officials claim that favourable weather conditions have contributed to the rise, but critics aren't buying it. They argue that Starmer's weak border policies and soft stance on immigration have turned Britain into an open-door state where people smugglers are thriving while British taxpayers foot the bill. And it's not just the opposition sounding the alarm. Even Labour insiders are beginning to question whether Starmer's handling of immigration is sustainable. The backlash is growing, the crisis is deepening, and yet the Prime Minister remains silent as the country edges closer to total border collapse. Despite Labour's empty promises to get tough on illegal migration, the facts tell a different story. By this point in the year, 2025, 1,489 crossings and rising fast, 2024, 1,442 crossings, 2023, 1,442 crossings, 1,335 crossings, 2022, 1,339 crossings, which led to a record-breaking 45,755 arrivals in total. The warning signs are clear. Britain is heading towards its worst year yet. The Home Office's excuse? The weather. They claim that good conditions in the Channel have made crossings easier. But let's be real, this isn't about the weather. This isn't bad luck. This is the direct result of Labour's open border policies, and it's only getting worse. The Rwanda deportation scheme was designed to act as a deterrent. Migrants making the dangerous journey across the Channel would face the reality that they would not be able to stay in the UK. And guess what? It was working. The moment Labour scrapped the policy, the smuggling gangs pounced, and the numbers started to skyrocket. Instead of taking urgent action, Labour has dismantled one of the few measures designed to protect the UK's borders. The Rwanda scheme was a clear warning to those entering the country illegally that they would be swiftly removed and processed elsewhere. Without this deterrent, illegal migrants now see Britain as a guaranteed destination rather than a risk. The problem isn't just the crossings, it's what happens next. The government is now struggling to house tens of thousands of illegal migrants, with many being placed in hotels at the taxpayers' expense. Meanwhile, reports are surfacing of asylum seekers receiving free accommodation, meals, and spending allowances, while British citizens struggle with the cost of living crisis. The backlash has been swift and severe. The British public is furious as Labour continues to show a complete lack of control over immigration. Instead of admitting their failure, the government is trying to spin the narrative, pretending they have a handle on the situation while the reality proves otherwise. Labour's new solution to the crisis is the Border Surrender Bill, a piece of legislation that, instead of cracking down on illegal migrants, provides them with a pathway to British citizenship. Critics argue that this will only incentivise more crossings, making the UK an even more attractive target for human traffickers and illegal migrants. Chris Philip, Shadow Home Secretary, has been one of the most vocal critics of Labour's catastrophic mismanagement of immigration. He ripped into Starmer's handling of the crisis, saying, "Labour is introducing their Border Surrender Bill, which gives illegal immigrants a path to citizenship. This is a weak government led by a weak Prime Minister." The anger doesn't stop there. Reform UK Deputy Leader Richard Tice torched Labour's border policy, warning that Starmer's so-called plans to smash the smuggling gangs are doing the exact opposite. Starmer's plans have failed. They must change course and adopt reform policy to pick up the boats and take them back. It's simple. If the UK doesn't deport illegal migrants, more will come. The moment the government signals weakness, the smugglers exploit it, and Starmer's actions have sent one loud, clear message. Britain's borders are open for business. Instead of tackling the issue head-on, Labour is pushing more legislation, promising more reviews, and making more empty speeches, while the crisis spirals further out of control. Meanwhile, British taxpayers are paying the price, with millions being spent on housing, processing, and supporting tens of thousands of illegal migrants. Even those who initially defended Labour's immigration stance are now beginning to admit the government is in deep trouble. Many former Labour voters, disillusioned by the party's inability to deliver strong leadership, are turning their backs on Starmer. But let's not forget, this is not an accident. Labour deliberately scrapped the Rwanda plan, knowing full well that crossings would increase. They allowed this crisis to unfold, refusing to take serious measures to protect Britain's borders. Even if Labour attempts to reverse course now, the damage has been done. The human traffickers have learned that Britain is a soft target. Illegal migrants now see the UK as a safe bet, and they're acting on that perception. The crossings will continue to rise, the costs will continue to escalate, and Labour's failures will only become more obvious. The question now is clear. Will Starmer finally admit his government has failed, or will Labour continue down this path, pushing the UK closer to total border collapse? While the migrant crisis spirals out of control, Labour is also presiding over an economic disaster, one that could push Britain straight into a deep recession. The UK economy is on the brink of collapse, with Chancellor Rachel Reeves struggling to contain a growing crisis. The Bank of England has now slashed its growth forecast for 2025 in half, with figures dropping to a pathetic 0.75%, a number so low it could be considered an economic death sentence for businesses already struggling under Labour's punishing tax regime. Labour's economic policies are not working. Instead of encouraging growth, Reeves has implemented a crushing £25 billion tax hike on businesses, sending shockwaves through sectors like retail and hospitality. Businesses are warning of mass closures. Job losses are mounting as companies struggle to afford Labour's tax burden. Inflation remains a ticking time bomb, with interest rates still dangerously high. The British public is feeling the pain of Labour's incompetence, with higher taxes, lower growth, and an economy that is stagnating under weak leadership. Independent economist Julian Jessop didn't hold back in his scathing criticism of Reeves's policies. They are gaslighting the British people. Labour is pretending to put money in their pockets while simultaneously draining it out through tax hikes. And the British public is waking up to Labour's lies. Labour's poll numbers are crashing. Reform UK has surged to 29%, now leading the race. Labour has slumped to 25%, losing control fast. Tories are in freefall at just 18%, their lowest point ever. Even Labour's own allies are beginning to panic. Former Labour advisor Matthew Laser warned that Reeves may have already lost control, saying, "With the downgrade in the growth forecast, there is not room for a second round of tax cuts. If things get worse, we will be back to austerity 2.0. That's right, austerity 2.0 is now on the table, despite Reeves promising that there would be no return to spending cuts. With the economy weakening faster than expected, it's becoming increasingly clear that Labour's tax and spend policies are failing, and the public isn't fooled. But Labour isn't just failing on immigration and the economy, they're also wasting taxpayers' money on an astonishing scale. As if Labour's border crisis and economic collapse weren't enough, London Mayor Sadiq Khan is now embroiled in a humiliating £1 billion scandal. Khan has spent £942 million on New Docklands Light Railway (DLR) trains, but they're stranded in Spain. Why? Because London doesn't have enough storage space for them. 90% of the new fleet is sitting in Spanish warehouses. Delays have caused costs to skyrocket from £880 million to £942 million. Commuters are still waiting for the upgrade, while paying for Khan's failures. Transport for London, TfL, is blaming contractor collapses, but this is just another example of Khan's inability to run London properly. His mayoralty has been defined by financial waste, transport failures, and crime spiralling out of control. The shocking part, this isn't even the first TfL disaster under his leadership. Under Khan, London's transport network has been plagued with severe delays and breakdowns across the underground, record high fares that hurt working-class Londoners the most, a financial black hole that has led to endless bailouts from the government. The question Londoners are asking now is clear: how much more taxpayer money will Khan waste before he's held accountable? If Labour's border failures, economic disasters, and financial waste weren't enough, another major scandal is brewing, and this time it's about women's sports. Olympic legend Sharon Davies MBE has called on Keir Starmer to follow Donald Trump's lead and ban transgender athletes from competing in women's categories. Trump just signed an executive order titled "Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports," and Davies is demanding Starmer do the same. Please, Keir Starmer, do what you said you would and protect female athletes in the UK. Stop males from stealing their places and increasing their risk of injury. Sex in sport really matters. Her warning is clear. Women's sport is under attack. Biological males are gaining unfair advantages. Young girls are losing out on opportunities and sponsorships. Davies didn't hold back, slamming the mainstream media for ignoring the voices of female athletes being pushed aside. Not one, Sky, BBC, Channel 4 have ever done a story on the young girl that's been shoved aside and not had her dream. They are constantly doing the poor me on the transgender athlete. The science is clear. Biological males have higher muscle mass, stronger bone density, and superior cardiovascular endurance. That's why women's sports were created in the first place, to ensure fairness. Yet, Labour refuses to act, allowing biological men to compete against women in sporting categories designed for females. Will Starmer take action to protect female athletes, or will he allow woke ideology to destroy women's sports forever? Labour's policy disasters are piling up. Border chaos, record migrant crossings with no plan from Starmer, economic disaster, Reeves's tax hikes crippling businesses, Sadiq Khan's £1 billion multi-billion-pound failure, Londoners paying for his mistakes. Women's sport under attack. Starmer refuses to act. Labour's honeymoon period is over, with public confidence crumbling, economic disaster looming, and border chaos unfolding before our eyes. Britain is waking up to the reality of Starmer's leadership. Labour is collapsing in the polls. Reform UK is surging. Tories are in freefall. With an election looming in the next few years, Labour is running out of time. The real question is, will the British people hold Starmer accountable before it's too late?